So cool. Well, yeah, as Shannon mentioned, this is kind of like a new format that we're testing out. The idea is to, because we see, we read a lot of articles, a lot of publications, we see a lot of posts and newsletters from various different folks, but sometimes we don't really get to know the people behind, some of the tech that's being put out there. So that's why we kind of came up with this idea of having these tech talks. So the first one that we're having here today is with Clifton Harness. He's the CEO of Testfit. So just kind of introduce yourself real quick. Who are you, Clifton?
Yeah, I'm the co-founder, CEO over here at Testfit Inc. We are about 3 years old, about 8 employees. We build just very practical generative design tools for people. All of our technology requires, no software experience whatsoever to use. So a lot of people that don't want to get into Dynamo and Grasshopper will come use Testfit. And that's afforded us the ability to spend years on building scripts to automate things in a very robust way.
Cool. So what's your background? How did you get here?
Yeah, great question. Background is BArch, Bachelor of Architecture from the University of Texas. So I spent 5 years in Austin, about 172 hours learning all about architecture, which was great. I'm very passionate about buildings, but I'm passionate about commodity buildings. I always found a desire to design apartments or office buildings or stuff like that over the sort of architecture school design program that makes you draw museums and stuff. So I went right into real estate development out of school, apartment development, and just realized that architecture was being taken advantage of, honestly. Free work, free site plans, free feasibility studies done all across the industry in the name of winning work. And so, that was sort of my background is feasibility, and it's absolutely ripe for disruption right now.
Mm-hmm. You kind of hinted a little. My next question was going to be, what is the motivation to develop Testfit? And you kind of started to hint about this, there's a lot of kind of free services that architects toss out there. Can you dig into a little bit more? When was that moment in time where you're like, wait a minute, why are we doing this for free? Why can't this be something that, comes back to the architect?
Well, yeah. It's a change in perception, I think, between what the development world expects and what the architecture world wants to deliver. And everything that I do is commodity buildings. So that's my one preface to everything that I say: commodity buildings, volume, lots of this stuff gets built. And so the development world treats it like a calculation. It's a risk. We have to figure out how to finance this building, figure out how to actually construct it, figure out how to lease it up. And so it's very methodical, math-based model. And when architecture approaches it, they say, okay, we have to draw the most beautiful possible site plan we could ever draw in order to get this thing to work. And that's actually not true. It's really, how do we solve this site plan within these factors in order to actually win the project? And then once you win the project, then you can start to have these discussions about, specific design moves you want to make as an architect. But it's always about trust first.
So you're looking into the logistics of it, kind of. So you're kind of thinking of it, as you mentioned earlier, like the risk from a developer's point of view. Like, how feasible is this? Why would I develop this piece of property? How would I develop it? That sort of situation.
Yeah, buildings are expensive things, right? Building costs, a big apartment building costs maybe $40-50 million. And I'm not talking about the Manhattan kind of buildings you guys see. I'm saying, here in Deep Ellum, Dallas, terrible webcam you can't see, but very simple buildings that like people would build in Dallas and other little cities all across the country. So
Yeah, I mean, well, commodity architecture, as you called it, it's like that's kind of like almost 90% of architecture, right? So it's a pretty big pool of buildings, not just citywide in a city, but globally, right?
That's actually not true. Commodity buildings, and I'm just going to pull up a firm survey from what the AIA does. But commodity buildings are only about 40%. I'm sorry. So commercial industrial is about 28%, and the residential is about 20%, and the other half is the institutional stuff. So really, Testfit's addressable market, is really only about half of the built environment. I have no desire to build a cathedral configurator. Like that's not something that we would ever do.
Interesting. All right, so I'm kind of surprised with those numbers. I would have thought that the commodity side of it was a lot larger. Um,
Governments spend a lot of money on buildings. Private citizens spend less money on buildings. Might be the only way I could say that maybe the numbers are distorted.
I see. I see. So, what was kind of that moment where you said to yourself, "All right, something has to change. I'm gonna be part of this." Like, what was your first step? What?
The first step came like the moment I was in my first internship in my first architecture firm, when they said I wasn't allowed to use blocks for the doors. That every door had to be, you know, four lines in an arc and then another line. Like it started there. It was like just the absolute absurdity of not using, tools that are meant to be used for the task at hand. So I think there's maybe 10% of every industry where there's like workers that are just not happy with the status quo. So I think I'm in that group. And then the real impetus though was counting parking spaces. I mean, like I could talk for hours about how much time and energy and effort is wasted tabulating things in this industry, and it doesn't need to be that way.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I remember the first and only time I did a door schedule, something like, I don't know, 15 or 18 years ago, and I realized, wow, why are we doing this?
Yeah, and BIM has helped to some extent, but only 50% of firms use 50% of architecture firms use BIM. So, everybody's obsessed with Revit this, Revit that. Okay, but there's still half of all buildings are not even in BIM, if not more, right?
Yeah. So you talked about, the kind of motivation started with, working at your first internship, and that was kind of like the moment of realization. So let's fast forward, a few years when you said to yourself, like, all right, I'm going to put a solution together, and I'm going to see where this goes. What were some of the steps that you started to kind of think about?
Yeah. So I think the first step for me that was huge was connecting with Ryan Grieg, who's my co-founder. He, software engineer, was my roommate in college. Brilliant guy. I called him one day and I said, "Hey man, I got a problem that like I don't think you'll be able to solve." And the best thing about engineers, the good engineers, you say there's a problem you can't solve, they'll be like, "Oh, we're going to solve it." So we started off just solving some simple math problems that I was struggling with. Brute force math problems that Excel is really bad at. And so that's where we started. And I would say the first step is to always find a co-founder, someone that is the opposite skill set as you, but you're teamed up to solve a problem together. I have none of the skills that Ryan has. I did this hackathon this past weekend, and the funny thing is everybody's like, "Oh, Testfit guy's here. He's probably really great at code." Nope, terrible at code. I'm an ideas guy. The only way that I've been successful is by partnering with the right guy.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I think there was, I forgot, it was one of the big tech leaders, and I won't mention a name because I can't remember which one it was, but they were being interviewed and they said, how do you always make the right decision? And his response was, well, I surround myself with the right people that inform me on how to make a right decision. So he was being obvious, saying like, I don't know everything. I just look for the right people like you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there's also another problem with that way of thinking is I've just got if I just find all of the right people to help me make this decision, I'll make the perfect decision. And you're 3 or 4 weeks down the road, what actually needs to happen in a lot of ways, and I'm a bull in a china shop, is let's just make a decision today, because in the sake of improving how terrible our performance is as an industry, let's make a decision today and let's go with it, and then we can fix it later, right? So move fast, break things. Testfit's not the most stable software on the planet because we're trying to move fast and we're trying to figure out what the future actually looks like. And you can't figure it out in a boardroom. You got to figure it out by building things and shipping it and seeing what people do with it.
Also experience, right? Like that's kind of that kind of I call them micro failures, right? You fail once,
Yep.
and then you realize, oh, I've learned so much from that. Let me move in this direction.
Yeah, failure is the only learning mechanism that over the course of thousands of years has been the tried and true method. You can teach people all you want, but they're not going to learn until they fail.
Yeah, I remember taking my IREs, and when I would take a sample test, all the questions that I got wrong were the questions that were ingrained in my brain. So I never forgot the right answer to those questions.
I wonder what it's like to study for the AREs. I just haven't done it. I don't know if I'd be able to do it.
I can give you some motivation, but I need a beer to talk about that one.
Oh, wait, same thing with Flux, right? We got to have a beer before we talk about anything with Charles.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer having a conversation over beer. Anyway, there's a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to read them out. Let's start with the first one. Is Testfit engine being developed using AI tech or purely rule-based algorithms?
That's a great question. Rule-based algorithms. We don't do any neural nets, any machine learning, or any genetic algorithms. Everything you see us do is procedural parametrics. So for the academics, we don't really do generative design. We generate a design, but we don't force the solver to continuously solve to find, an optimal. So that's probably the best way I can explain what we do.
Cool. There's another question in the chat. There's a Facebook group called We Do Incremental Development, where small developers post about the development process for small and medium-sized housing and mixed-use projects. How can generative design be marketed towards small real estate development? Also, how can social media be effectively utilized to expand opportunities in generative design?
That's a great question. So, all right. The first thing is you have to have a product for that market sector, right? Missing middle. I'm super interested in missing middle. Honestly, more interested in affordable housing because it's a problem that we as a country can't figure out. And it has something to do with politics and money and all kinds of things. But the first start is to have a product that you can address the market with in mid to low density. We don't currently. We will later this week. We're going to release a little missing middle configurator that will start to address that density. As far as social media, the only way to make it anywhere on social media is consistency. If you want people to know your message, the only way you can do it is to consistently post. And Testfit would be dead without social media. But at the same time, all of the best sales that you will ever make as a business founder or as a leader, someone in my position, is when you outbound. You go out and you find people and you say, hey, what if we could totally change how you approach the planning process? But outbound takes consistency too. So, if you wanted to get really involved in a sort of missing middle, lower density area of the market, yeah, Facebook groups would be great. Maybe I should hop on the Facebook group and talk about what we're doing with missing middle. But it's hard to come off as genuine when you're just being, trying to find money from people. I'm running a business. I need to make money, right? I can't just give away the most cutting edge configurator for free forever, right? So I'm,
Yeah, I agree. I think there was, having been in the startup world for a little bit and experienced it, I kind of put companies into two categories. One is a company that is trying to make money and then they have like an immediate exit strategy. They just, here's something, sell it and move on. And then there's a company where it was founded by someone that had a problem, saw the problem, understood the problem, and wanted to solve the problem. Like they're passionate and adamant about solving that one problem. Obviously, it seems like you fall into that latter category. Yeah, you have a business, you need to pay people and so on, but you single-handedly experienced this problem and want to solve it.
Yeah, I get really frustrated when other startups spin up and, it's clearly like, I don't know, like maybe there's a good example out there, but I'm being political, so I can't say who it is, right? But clearly it's a guy that has an MBA or something, got an outrageous amount of funding to disrupt construction. Oh, you could look at some of the big SoftBank companies, but, none of these executives that they bring in specifically have experience solving AEC construction development related problems. So, what you have is people that don't understand the problem trying to solve it with software, and you get a bunch of crap get built. People at the very end of the Autodesk generative design presentation, they said to their audience, we are not architects and engineers. So you have to tell us what you want us to design or what you want us to build inside this tool. So there is a huge disconnect between the software companies and the users on the ground. And that's a huge problem that, I get to solve because I'm talking to my customers all day, every day. But you got to bet that the CEO of Autodesk is not sitting down with a draftsman at ABC Architects to talk about their needs.
No, I totally echo your sentiment. You need the knowledge of the people that can build it, but you also need the knowledge of the people that can speak the speak and so on. So like kind of having that mediator works really well. I found that firsthand as well in my past. We have another question from the audience. As a general contractor, can I leverage Testfit to improve my process?
Yeah, absolutely. We have, I think, 4 contracting firms that work with us right now. It's not our target market. What I mean by that is it's not, architects and developers. That's really where we get most of our attraction. But the development guys use Testfit to do instantaneous quantity takeoffs. I mean, that's another mind-numbing thing that I can't believe that there's thousands of people across the country all day just doing, on-screen takeoff. So we do it automatically. You can go into a development client and say, hey, this is a different design that could possibly be better for construction. And I really would encourage contractors to weigh in on design decisions. They honestly don't, and it's a huge shame because they're on the ground actually building this stuff. And if we got the feedback back in the studio of what needs to be changed, we'd make it. But too bad that feedback comes in CDs or, way down the road. So give it to us in SDs.
Yeah, it comes late in the game. So it seems like that McLeamy curve could take away the BIM in that curve, and you could use it for many other things.
Yeah.
We have one more question. We're going to take the last question from the audience. How can a user choose the best option from the design options that Testfit generates? Is there any metrics that may evaluate each design option?
Yeah, we spit out hundreds of metrics natively. So, the way that I answer this question is, okay, best to who? Is this the best option that doesn't cast shade on your neighbor? Is this the best option that makes the most amount of money for your client? Is this the option that takes into context the buildings next to you the best? So building design is in and of itself a trade-off between all these different things. And the way that people solve these trade-offs today is like in SketchUp or on like trace paper, which is stupid. Use a tool that can do very quick analysis of, okay, what if I move the entire building to this side of the site? You know, what happens to my parking? So I think we're in the early days of what configurators will be able to do for the industry. But I can tell you right now that the value that we bring is to kill off stupid projects that don't work. And as we work towards optimization, then we can start to say, okay, here's how you actually make these projects work.
Yeah, we're going to sneak in one more question from the audience. Is generative design a better use case for architects or for urban planners who plan urban designs for cities?
I think both. You know, I don't think it's an either or question. You know, urban planning problems are very different from building design problems. You know, if you're an urban planner and you don't take some kind of stance as to what you're going to do against gentrification for this specific kind of plan, you know, I'd be surprised. But it's just very different. It's a very different approach to what the city needs versus what this specific site needs. And I think you would be, well, first off, there's not very many urban planning, well, there's probably too many. There's not very many useful, I don't think, urban planning generative design tools out there. I mean, there's Google spinning up their own, like, I don't really know what it does or what it, you know, it's black box to me. But some of the things that they're focused on are not things that you would focus on, you know, for a building specifically instead of as a whole master plan. So yeah, you got to use both. And I think in the future, we're going to see every kind of vertical is going to have a generative design tool for it. You know, windows, what kind of windows are you going to do here? There's literally millions of options on windows. I'm not just saying the kinds of panes. I'm saying, you know, fenestration. How do the mullions work? You know, there's just so many options and parameters you can throw into everything. And I just, you know, practically the stuff that we need to build is like big moves, parking garages. Let's optimize those. You know, let's optimize the apartment buildings. Let's not start with, you know, we're gonna make the whole building perfectly masked so that, you know, sun. You know, I'm just saying, like Norman Foster, you wouldn't do any of that kind of stuff for commodity apartment buildings in the country, right? I'm just talking. I wish there was more people talking, but
I mean, that's the whole point of like an interview, right? It's like to get to know you and your thinking.
Yeah.
Well, cool. With that being said, I just got notice that we're up out of time. So thank you, Clifton, for joining us. I will put this out there in the future. If you do want to kind of pick my brain over a beer, I'm always welcome. I'm always open to the idea. So thank you, Clifton.
Yeah, thank you all for having me. Look forward to staying around at Thornton Tomasetti for years to come.